What was your goal in co-founding this company?
I think actually it comes back to like the core problem, which is that art can't be free. There has to be somebody to fund creative work in the world.
Rolls Radio.
Welcome back to Rolls Radio. Today we're diving into a topic that's directly aligned with the purpose of this show, and that's the sharing of music for independent musicians and bands. We're talking about uploading music using an RSS feed and getting paid directly by your listeners through the value for value model. Joining me today is Nick Malster, co-founder and chief marketing officer at Fountain, one of the leading podcasting 2.0 apps pushing this movement forward. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for the invitation. Good to be here.
So let's start at the foundation. What is podcasting 2.0 for people who are hearing that term for the first time?
Well, I guess podcasting 2.0 is a slightly misleading phrase because it also now encompasses music, but certainly when it started a few years ago, it was just focused on podcasting. Podcasting 2.0 is a set of standards that we can apply to RSS feeds to enable new features across the ecosystem of different apps. So an example of that might be the splits. So each podcast or artist or even track can have its own split. Splits determine where payments go when listeners send money to them. And so any podcast app that reads the RSS feed will see a track, will see, okay, here are the splits. When somebody sends a payment, I need to send the money on to this person and this person and this person. And having that consistent standard means that we're all kind of building on flat ground, and we have things that are cross-compatible across the ecosystem and then can be built out across multiple different apps.
So like for instance, if a band is participating in this, they can do what you referenced, which are splits, where each of them can be paid equally for however a listener is choosing to send value. Or does that sound right?
Exactly, yeah. And what's really interesting about splits is they allow you to do things that just aren't possible within the traditional music economy or the system. I'm sure people who listen to this show who are artists have first-hand experience of getting paid out from royalties or not, for that, whatever the case may be. And it's a very elongated process where the money moves through different layers and then finally it ends up in a bank account. And the splits allow the payments to be made instantly, but also completely transparently and programmable. So the money can reach the drummer, the keyboard player, the singer, the guitarist, all at the same time, and the money split evenly. So it's allowing new things that weren't possible within the traditional system, but also the traditional payment system underneath that.
Yeah, and so I want to get a little bit into that because there's pieces that some listeners may or may not be familiar with, and so we're talking about this value for value model, which is what we've already started describing. It's direct payments to the artist creating their work. Splits doing that the exact same way. And we talk about this being built on a network, specifically the Lightning Network. And what that is a protocol built on top of the Bitcoin blockchain to allow that direct peer-to-peer exchange. So, Nick, my question for you is, how does that Lightning Network specifically play a role in this micropayments for audio? And that was essentially built on top of that, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's really just not practical to send small amounts of money on the base layer of Bitcoin on through the blockchain, just because it's slow, right? And it's not programmable in the same way. You have one sender, one recipient, and the Lightning Network changes that completely. So think of the Lightning Network as the layer above, like the transaction layer above the blockchain, and yeah, like I said, I suppose it allows for payments to be made really, really easily, low fee, and in a programmable way. So when you download Fountain as a user, we give you a Lightning wallet. You can top that up with your bank card. You can buy Bitcoin elsewhere and move it into your Lightning wallet on Fountain. And you can then send a payment directly to the artist, either by streaming sats, which are just small units of Bitcoin, streaming sats for every minute you spend listening, or sending a boost, which is just a payment with a comment attached.
Now, I want to get into a little bit about how you founded Fountain, and specifically, would essentially the method that we're describing here wouldn't be possible without the Lightning Network. Is that correct? I mean, you could be still streaming music, but the actual value for value, the transactional nature of how the Lightning Network works, wouldn't necessarily be possible. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I suppose so. I guess like the different ways that you have to pay, like the boosts I mentioned, sending a payment from one person to another with traditional payment rails is possible. But you do have to pay high fees and you have to trust a middleman like PayPal or Visa or whoever to process that transaction. And of course, it doesn't settle instantly. It settles after a few days. With the Lightning Network, you can make that payment instantly and with very low fees. So for things like boosts, yes, it is possible, but it's definitely much lower friction when you're using Lightning. And for things like streaming sats, that just isn't possible at all with traditional payment rails. There's no way to send, a cent or a few cents every minute or even every second to a certain wallet address. It's just not possible. So it does unlock new ways to support, which I think is quite interesting. And building on that too, going back to the splits, one really interesting thing that we've spoken about before is these different music shows. So a podcast is hosted on an RSS feed, and within each RSS feed, you have the episodes. The episodes can actually reference different music that are available on other feeds so that you can actually play full-length tracks. So you could do like a DJ sort of radio talk show, 60 minutes long, playing music, maybe a bit of commentary in between. When one track ends and the other track begins, the payment splits will actually change. So if you're streaming sats, I could be streaming sats to one artist, and then you come on, introduce the next song, and then the splits change, and now I'm then supporting the other artist. And so when you combine these different technologies on the protocol level, you can actually deliver pretty phenomenal new experiences that weren't possible before.
Yeah, this is amazing. And when we had the conversation, it really blew my mind. You shared some other shows that do this, Homegrown Hits being one of them. There's other folks who do this value for value stream radio style, and it's just so amazing. And in my mind, I always wanted it to be there, and the technology's now here. And I wanted to continue down that path of the RSS feed. So essentially, how does a musician take advantage of this? How do they get started with uploading their own music to an RSS feed? What types of things do they have to do? And we can transition into how Fountain does that, or how just they do it in general. But I'm just curious, how do musicians start this process?
Yeah, so there's kind of, I guess, two approaches. The first approach is to actually self-host your RSS feed, which is actually much easier than it sounds. An RSS feed, after all, is only an XML file, so like a document which includes a load of metadata about the artist, the different releases, the different tracks, and then all the metadata for the tracks, like the release date or the splits or anything like that. So if you wanted to go down that route, there are different templates you can use, and you can just reference the hosted media files, i.e. your tracks, in the feed and put it out that way. And if you do it that way, you are fully self-sovereign. You manage the feed. There's literally no middlemen at all. But just to make things more practical, we do have a really simple product that artists can use today. So you can just go to fountain.fm/artists, sign up. It only costs $1 a month. You can upload unlimited amounts of music. You have the splits. You also have card payments as well. So give people the option to pay if they don't want to use Bitcoin. And you have a dashboard where you can see the performance of your tracks. So you can see how many plays, all the different payments, all the comments. So if you've ever uploaded music to SoundCloud before or something similar, you'll find uploading to Fountain very familiar. And we just create and manage the feed for you. So you can just go in, add new tracks, go in, edit old tracks, and everything's really seamless. Yeah,
Fountain makes it very easy and seamless. And that just brings me to the next question. So what was your goal in co-founding this company? What did you have in mind? Why did you create this service? What does it mean to you?
So when we started Fountain back in 2021, it was purely a podcast app. And it really just happened by chance that we landed on the idea to build a podcast app at the same time that podcasting 2.0 as a movement was evolving. So when we first started, the Lightning payments weren't even part of the podcasting 2.0 spec. But when we saw that they were, we really kind of dove into that because we wanted to be at the forefront for enabling new types of experiences. So I guess it just evolved organically. We started on podcasts to begin with, and then we saw that organically people were using RSS to distribute music as well, and we wanted to cater for that in some way. And I think actually it comes back to like the core problem, which is that art can't be free. There has to be somebody to fund creative work in the world. And in the world of podcasting, it's generally advertisers. In the world of music, you don't have that so much. And so artists need to find a way to be self-sustaining and to be independent, particularly smaller ones who don't have, huge ticket sales or merch sales or streaming royalties, like giving them a way to build their own business in a way they can manage it completely autonomously.
Yeah, this is flipping the industry on its head. I mean, the record label model, right? And it's just, we've seen all the documentaries on artists getting robbed and all that stuff. But the nature of the way music sharing is evolving this just feels right. And I'm appreciative of services like Fountain because it's introduced me to this world in a different light, right? As I started exploring more about this, where we are with our world in terms of hyperinflation and all of these things that make it so difficult to afford anything. And music's just that. It's such a core base level craft that feeds the souls of so many people. And podcasting is just like that in the sense of it's just creative. And I like how you said that as you were talking about, one of your goals for starting the company is art needs to be paid for. I think I don't know exactly the words that you use, but it's essentially just that value comes all back to that value for value. How can we get the art directly to the people who value it the most? Artists can just go to fountain.fm. They can sign up for the service. I think you said it's $1 a month, right? And they can have their music managed, tracked, analyzed, and basically paid directly. Because I'm sure you guys have the Lightning wallet generation right built in there as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, this is awesome. I mean, these are the main questions that I wanted to cover because, again, I'm just introducing this concept to my audience, and my goal is to share this message with as many folks as I can. Talk to folks who are already doing it, to talk to folks who aren't aware of it, just to share this information in this way that they can be valued for their work. Is there anything else before we close out, more and specific to Fountain? I guess I would wonder where people would go. You said fountain.fm, but where would people go to contact you? Where would you like to send people? And then any other closing thoughts you may have?
Yeah, I guess there's one closing thought that we didn't cover so much because we covered RSS, which is the protocol we use for publishing and distributing your music in an open way. We covered Lightning, which is the way to monetize your music in an open way. But we also built on Nostr, which is a social media protocol, essentially, which is open and free. The reason we did this is so that it gives fans an easy way to interact with your music and contact you directly. And Nostr allows you to build communities around your creative work. So you have a Nostr profile. There are hundreds now of like different Nostr apps, very similar to like Mastodon, where you have like one profile that you can use in many different apps. Nostr works in exactly the same way. And so when you create your artist profile on Fountain and publish your music, you can also create a Nostr profile too. That means you can then start publishing your music to the Nostr network. And there's a range of different Nostr apps, some which are more like X or Twitter, some which are more like Instagram, some which are more like Twitch, but they're all running on the same core technology. And I think what's really interesting about this is that it allows you to just hear directly from your fans. That's not really possible in like traditional music players like Apple Music or Spotify. You don't have any comments, you don't have any social interaction, you don't have any way to interface directly with the people listening to your music. So I'd say that's another great benefit of using Fountain. It's also great for discovery too, because Nostr is still fairly early on in its development. It doesn't have a multi-billion worldwide user base. It's emerging, and it means that actually your music can stand out. It's not completely saturated with artists self-promoting themselves and the bigger players getting involved. It's an opportunity for you to cut through and find an audience. And going back to like the type of music we have on the Fountain, I wouldn't say that our back catalog or like the type of music we have on there is, of course, it's not going to have everything. You don't have everything that you find when you go onto Apple Music or Spotify. But that's kind of the beauty of it, is that we have very niche, maybe underexposed artists who have just room to breathe on these platforms and are not dominated by the big labels, the big names that we all know.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Yeah, you think of the adoption curve and which part we are. This type of technology, it's freedom technology, and I mean, you can't speak in absolutes, but it just feels like a matter of time before this type of thing takes over. It starts back to that self-sovereignty principle. Nostr, podcasting 2.0, RSS feed management, and music distribution for digital creators, for artists, the Bitcoin standard on how we're transmitting value across the world, is in its such an early stage of the adoption curve. And it's reminds me of the early days, and I made this post on Nostr, the early days of Facebook when that had first launched. It was people realizing and discovering social media, right? It was built on the internet protocol, and it was built on the internet. And it was great because you could connect with people in a different way. Now we've seen the centralized social media networks go down that path, and we know where that leads. This is and I've heard it on podcasts before, and it feels like Nostr is that nature's reaction to the attempt at centralization and all of these decentralized movements and protocols that are being built. They just feel right. I keep going back to that. It just feels right. And we do this thing where we challenge and we question and we try and poke holes in things. And this one's hard to poke holes in. This whole decentralization thing is hard to poke holes in because it really gives people back the value that they create. It allows people to get value back for what they create. So I'm glad you mentioned Nostr. I didn't even realize, I didn't even bring that up, and that was such a valid point. So are you on Nostr as well?
Yeah, you can find me just by searching my name, Nick Malster. But yeah, I mean, to your point about decentralization, I think one thing it does also offer is some level of censorship resistance. So we saw yesterday in the UK, Monday, 15th of June, that our PM, Keir Starmer, is outlawing social media for children under the age of 16. So government have increasing controls. Those governments are also influenced increasingly by the big tech companies about how to, or whether not to, provide access to certain people to social media and apply certain limits or barriers there. And Nostr is a way to continue using social media in a way that works for you, in a way that governments can't shut it down.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's definitely that piece. I think one of the challenges and one of the conversations that's going on Nostr right now is how are we sharing what this is and what this means to people who don't use it or don't know about it. It's one of the goals of what I want to do here is just introduce this concept to people. But how are we doing that? How are we sharing that this is a protocol that can be censorship resistant, can be you own your own content, you own, bringing people from external sources or sites or whatever social medias into the Nostr protocol. And you mentioned it, you get one private address in the Nostr protocol, and you can use the limitless apps as many apps are created around, or many clients that are created around that. Like, you've got Snapchat, you've got Instagram, you got X, you've got Facebook, you've got all these different platforms you've got to create and different profiles, you take your content with you across these clients in the Nostr protocol. So it's a very cool thing. And yeah, I think this has been great. This has been an awesome conversation. I think it'd be worth it to maybe connect every now and then, Nick, as we, as time goes by and we watch these whole ideas evolve, right? Like you said, we're early in this adoption curve. What does this look like in a few years? What does this look like, in even a few months, right? Things change and things happen quick. But yeah, it's been great having you. So yeah, this is great for musicians listening. You don't need a label. You don't need permission. You don't need a platform taking X, Y, Z %, 30% of your money, the value that you create. You can publish your music through an RSS feed, connect a Lightning wallet, get paid directly by your fans, utilize Fountain.fm, as we talked about earlier in this episode to get started. Thanks to Nick and Fountain for pushing this movement forward.
Thank you. And then, just for anyone who's curious to learn more or get started, I would always recommend first just going to the App Store or Google Play Store, downloading Fountain, experiencing it first as a listener. So if you have some sats in the Lightning wallet, top up your Fountain wallet, go and explore some music, support a few artists, explore the feed, see which other music other listeners are supporting, see how it all works. And then if you're ready to publish, just go to fountain.fm/artists. Only takes a few minutes to get set up. And the last thing I'd always also recommend is just going to primal.net, creating a Nostr profile and exploring Primal, because it's a great way to share the music that you're publishing through Fountain. And think of it this way, it's like you publish your music once through Nostr, and it's like people on Snapchat, YouTube, Instagram, and X are all able to see that same post, and they're all able to interact with it without having to switch apps. So definitely worth checking out.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for joining. And we'll talk again another time.
Thank you.